If you could please keep your microphones turned off so that you stay on mute, that would be much appreciated. We'll have some time for some questions towards the end. Okay. This presentation will probably take more than 30 minutes. So if you have to duck away, you'll be able to find this recording on our website. Okay. So tonight I want to start by talking about what is the numeracy co-requisite. So from next year, to gain NCEA, an NCEA qualification, students must pass the numeracy standard, which is use mathematics and statistics to meet the numeracy demands in a range of situations. The Ministry of Education's aim in bringing the standard in is to ensure that all students with an NCEA qualification have a common benchmark or a base level of numeracy. This is alongside the reading and the writing co-requisites. Okay. How does this fit into the NCEA changes? So we're in the process at the moment of transitioning from the existing NCEA qualification into a new version of this qualification. And in 2024, the Level 1 achievement standards changed to bring about new achievement standards. So our Year 10 children will be experiencing these new standards next year in 2024. And NCEA Level 1 will change from an 80 credit qualification that it is now to become a new 60 credit qualification. But alongside the 60 credits, students need to gain the literacy and the numeracy co-requisites. Now, I've put a little asterisk next to that because I'm a parent of Year 10 children as well, and we're an interesting year. We're being a transition space. There are a few other ways that could happen, but the simplest way to look at it is that they gain their 60 credits from other subjects, and then they gain literacy and numeracy co-requisites. Carrying on with the NCEA changes, Level 2 for our Year 10 students will be the existing Level 2 standards. So the Level 2 changes don't come in until after our children have been through NCEA Level 2. So they will have the new standards next year for Level 1, and then they will be in the current standards that exist for Level 2 and Level 3. So these standards are just a way of chunking or organising the curriculum. So the content that the students are learning is the same. It's Level 6 of the New Zealand curriculum, and it's the same maths content. It's just chunked into a different way, and the assessment style is slightly different. So the assessment chunks are slightly bigger. The students will sit a maximum of 2 internal assessments or assessments in class and 2 external assessments or assessments out of class. Now that's quite a lot of information, and you will have lots of opportunity to understand this as they get into this program of learning. From my point of view as a mother of Year 10 boys, I'm personally not worried about this. The program that they're going through will be fine. The kids will be learning the same type of skills, and it's not something to be worried about. Right. The numeracy co-requisite. So the numeracy co-requisite has 2 kind of main concepts woven together. So one is the content ideas, which are the green strands in this diagram, which are the list of sort of content for numeracy. And we'll talk more about that in a moment. And the blue strands through are the process ideas, so sort of what they're doing with it and how they're using this information and explaining this information. So these process and content ideas that come together within the numeracy co-requisite. So the content components of the numeracy co-requisite cover the things that you would expect to see. So operations on numbers, the proportional thinking, things like all those sort of fractions and decimals and things like that, mathematical relationships, okay, spatial properties and representations of 3D drawings, all of that kind of thing, location and navigation, so distance, it's all go here tonight, distance and direction, measurement, all of those sort of time, quantities, volumes, things like that, statistics and data, so graphs, tables, and elements of charts, so probability. So of this presentation, which will be also attached to our webpage, you can look at example questions for each of these, so you can see how these components play out in questions. But what I want to show you, what I would like to show you is an example assessment. So how this will look and how this will feel for the students that are taking part in it. So this is a digital assessment. Okay, so they will come into the theatre if they haven't got special assessment conditions. They will sit down with their laptop and they will have a login where they will open up their assessment, and I'm going to show you what that will look like. Okay. So what we're looking at here is question 1. So when you first go in, there's a little bit of login stuff, and then you get to the questions. So this is the style that it will look like. Okay, so question 1 here, we've got a question about eggs. Okay, so they're all in real life context. So this table shows how eggs are graded by minimum weight, and it gives all the different weights for gradings, and then it's asking what grade would an egg that weighs 60 grams fit into. Okay, so you can see it's more than 53, but it's less than 62, so it's going to be a grade 6 egg, right? If you look at the next question, calculate the minimum weight of 1 dozen 12 eggs that are grade 7. So the students will have a calculator, so they will be able to use their calculator to work out that question. If they're not understanding the words, if they're reading level or they want to hear it read out loud, there's a little box up in the top corner here, which is poly. So when I click on that, and it creates a white box around this poly, and then I can highlight text, and it will play it for me. So
calculate the minimum weight of 1 dozen 12 eggs that are grade 7.
Okay, so it will read back any text that I highlight, and this is available for every student. So it will give us...
On average, New Zealanders eat about 250 eggs each per year. The population of New Zealand is just over 5 million people.
Oops, I don't want to play that again. So if the students will come to this exam and they can have their own headphones, and they can ask Polly, which is the little box there, to read any of the text to them, including any text that they might write in. It can read back their own text. So when we see this question here, average New Zealanders eat about 250 eggs each per year, population New Zealand just over 5 million. And then here's a headline from a newspaper, it's no joke, New Zealanders eat over 1 billion eggs per year. And they're asking, is the heading realistic? And explain your answer using the information provided in part C. So this is when we'd be doing the maths to work out from above how many eggs New Zealand actually eats, and then we'd be answering the question. So is it over 1 billion eggs per year? So we'd be saying, showing the maths and then saying, yes, it is. Just notice that we can spell check as well in this part here. Now, I'm not going to go through every question, but I'm going to show you what some of the other questions look like. Move on to the next page. Here's one about making muffins. It's asking how many cups of flour can you get out of a bag of flour. It's asking which type of buttons, chocolate buttons are the best to buy, and there's different ways your students can answer that. And then it's asking to up the recipe so that it caters for 30 people. So this is a measurement question. So very much numeracy contextual based, different from mathematics. Right, I'm going to go back to this page. Okay. So the numeracy co-requisite is contextual questions set in real life contexts, and it is level 4 of the curriculum. So it is lower than what a lot of our year 9 and 10 students are working on in school, and bearing in mind that NCA level 1 is level 6 of the curriculum. So it is at a lower level, but it does have a lot of text around it, and it does have a lot of like current day phrases. So some of the questions are around ACC, and there's another question about Zoe Sadowski-Sinnott and her skiing in that sample assessment. So there's lots of context around that some students find quite tricky, and there's a lot of justifying of their answers, which for some questions they find that quite tricky as well. Right. Special assessment conditions, so that poly is available for everybody, so any student can use that if they want to. students that have special assessment conditions for learning differences, they can use these in this assessment, and Penny Hearn, our SEC coordinator, will be in contact with students and families sort of as we get closer to the time and making those arrangements for those students. Okay, I'm going to pass over to Juliet now. She's going to talk through some of the things that we've learned from the pilot.
Right, kia ora everyone. I'm Juliet Jones. I'm the Assistant Head of Mathematics, as well as the Numeracy Coordinator and the Coordinator for the Junior Mathematics Program. So part of my job as the Numeracy Coordinator is kind of to look at the results from our pilot last year and determine a prediction tool to decide whether students are going to be ready for this co-requisite or not ready for the co-requisite. Essentially, we don't want to be entering any students into the co-requisite exams unless they're ready. We don't want to be setting them up for failure. So we took the data from the last year's pilot and we kind of correlated that against all sorts of data, their math in class test data, their reading data, their writing data, the standardised test in maths. And we found that the best prediction tool for the numeracy pilot was based on our PAT standardised test for mathematics. So I'll just explain what that is. So PAT stands for a progressive assessment test, which it's an online test where they ask different mathematical questions across all strands from statistics, measurement, geometry, number, and it's an adaptive test, so students are getting questions correct, they're getting harder questions. If they're getting questions wrong, they're getting easier questions. And at the end of that test, after anywhere between 25 and 40 questions, the AI behind this program will spit out a grade between 1 and 9, 1 being your student is in the lowest 10% for a student of their age, up to a 9, which means they're in the top 90th percent of a student their age. We sit these tests at start of year 9, at the end of year 9, and again at the end of year 10. So end of year 10 was too late, obviously, for us to predict anything. So using just the average of the 2 tests that they do in the year 9, we produced this graph that you're seeing on the screen at the moment against whether they were successful in the numeracy co-requisite or not successful, and they need to sit it again. As you can see, the blue is the successful students and the orange is the not successful students, and you can quite clearly see there's a cut-off at Stanine 4. So along the bottom, you've got their average Stanine scores. Some of them are half points because they might have got a 6 in one test and a 7 in the other test, so they got an average of 6.5. As you can see, once a student has a Stanine of 5 or greater, they've almost got 100% probability of passing this test, so they're definitely ready. When they get down to the 4, there's about a 20% probability of them not achieving it. But remember, when these year 10s sat this pilot, we didn't do any preparation for this numeracy test. We had no idea what it was going to look like. We didn't have any resources. So a lot of these kids were going in quite blind. This year, hopefully, if you're a Stanine 4 or greater, there's been more preparation, and hopefully those results are better than 80% this time. But once you go below that Stanine level of 4, the probability of a student actually passing the test is much more depreciated. The 7, if you look at the 8 students who did have quite a low PAT test that did pass, those students all had quite high reading levels. So Lee, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. So along with looking at that kind of PAT data and seeing the students who have a Stanine of 4 or greater, they're definitely being entered. Anyone lower than that, we had also looked at their reading scores. So this graph is shows you the probability of them passing the pilot test based on their reading E-ASTL, which is curriculum grades. So 4B stands for 4 basic, 4P for 4 proficient, and 4A for 4 advanced. And you can quite clearly see that once a student has a 4 advanced score in their reading ability, as Lee showed you that practice test, there's quite a lot of comprehension and reading components to that test. So once a student's at curriculum level 4 advanced, they have the reading ability to unpack the questions and answer the math questions. So we kind of look at both the reading ability and math ability when we're deciding whether to enter your students or not. Can you go to the next slide, please, Lee? This slide shows you what the Ministry of Education did with the data they collected from the pilot. So they had an independent evaluation across thousands of students across the motu. And they also recommended a 4 advanced level in reading as kind of the cutoff to determine readiness for these co-requisites. This is all of the co-requisites. The blue line's numeracy, the yellow is writing, and the green is reading. And that 4A level of proficiency in reading obviously is a definite cutoff to determine whether your students are going to be ready to pass this co-requisite or not. So that's basically how what the pilot has told us, and how we're going to determine whether your children are going to be sitting which test and when. The other things we learnt about the pilot is the kind of the strengths and weaknesses from sitting that test. It's important to know that the students are never going to get those assessments back. They will not know whether they did well in the measurement and not so good in the statistics. So all they're going to get is a pass and fail, and all we get is what you're seeing on the screen now, a kind of summary of what the students did well and what the students did not so well across the country, not particular to Wakatipu High School. So the things they did well was just straightforward calculations and multiplication, division, finding averages, compass directions, and identifying viewpoints, spatial viewpoints. And the things they didn't do so good were proportional reasoning, that's your percentage, fractions, and decimals, doing subtraction with time, interpreting data displays, and measurement, in particular, the conversions of measurement, and being confused between lengths and angles and areas and volumes and things like that. Can you go to the next slide? So kind of with that summary that NZQA gave us about the weaknesses of the students, we've changed the Year 10 curriculum for this year. So last year, the Year 10 didn't do their measurement topic until term 4. So we've pushed all the kind of numeracy content to the beginning of the year. So what you can see is our kind of junior program for Year 10. Term 1, we always start with number and algebra because they're the kind of foundation blocks for all the harder level maths that they're going to learn. And then in the 10 weeks leading up to the first common assessment task or the co-requisite, they will do measurement, which they're doing now. They should all be studying hard for the measurement test at the moment. And then they go into proportional reasoning. So those are the two things that are outlined as having difficulty with. And we've also, because our statistics module doesn't come until after that, we're putting some statistics into the proportional thinking where the kids are having to take percentages and fractions and decimals out of graphs and discuss them as part of their proportional reasoning topic. And that's just so that content that's in the numeracy exam is kind of forefront of their mind. It's the most recent math they've done. But you have to understand maths and numeracy are not the same thing. We do have to do graphing and trigonometry and Pythagoras and probability theory and that kind of thing, which is outside of numeracy. That's more the mathematics component. So we can't do numeracy all year. And the next slide. Oh, I forgot to mention that we do have numeracy classes, and they get more numeracy support, but they still follow the same Year 10 program as the rest of the Year 10 cohort. Along with that, as far as the numeracy preparation in our current curriculum for mathematics, we've decided, well, we had paid for these books. It was paid for via the COVID Loss of Learning Fund. Not all students have them though. So we identified, so our classes of mathematics are streamed. So the top set classes are not getting this book, whereas kind of the mid-band down are getting this book. So you may have already seen this book at home already. So this is a write-on book. It has 40 practice numeracy style questions in it. They're laid out exactly the same as the practice assessment that Lee showed you. So each page has 3 questions on it. Some of them are number, some of the statistics, some of them are measurement. And now the class teachers have decided how they use this. Some teachers are using them as a kind of a take-home homework activity, and other class teachers are using it in class as kind of warm-up activity at the beginning of each classes. So they're available. Now, if you are wondering whether your student has access to this book or not, you can show them this video and ask them. Otherwise, if your student doesn't, you're more than welcome to buy one online. There's a link to the online orders, but there is a lot of other ways to access practice, such as the Education Perfect, which Lee will talk about in a moment, and other avenues of practice material. Hopefully that was clear enough.
Thank you, Juliet. I'll now sort of talk about students that are entered in the Term 4 assessment. So as Juliet said, NZQA recommends that students sit this assessment when they're likely to pass it. So we, through the graphs and the data analysis that Juliet has done, we've sort of worked out students that have a reasonable chance of passing this assessment and they are entered in the first round. And then as the year progresses and they pick up more of those math skills that are going to help them with their numeracy, and also their reading develops through the other programs and work they're doing, and their numeracy develops through all the other things that they're doing that involve numeracy, their probability of passing goes up as the year goes on. So students can sit this assessment as many times as they need to until they pass it. So there's these biannual opportunities and they can have another go at it next year, and there will be some of our Year 11 students having a go at it that didn't get the pilot in the Term 4 round this year as well. So that point that Juliet made, that we don't get any feedback about what they get right or wrong. So in a class test, when a student sits a test with their maths teacher, the maths teacher's going through the assessment with them afterwards to see what they got right and wrong, and see where their understanding is and what they're not yet understanding, whereas they don't get that kind of feedback from this test. So sitting this test doesn't have that value in it if they're not ready for it. The other points in here that they just don't get awarded the NCEA qualification until they have the numeracy co-requisite and the literacy and writing, reading and writing. The asterisk is there again because of this sort of strange transition year that our children are in. That there are a few ways around that, but for simplicity, they get the co-requisites as they're able to, and then their qualification is awarded if they've met the other requirements. A point to note, and the part we want to get into about this, the difference between numeracy and mathematics, that not passing the co-requisite does not decide what maths class they go into in Year 11. So the thing that decides their maths class for Year 11 is how they are going in the maths content and mathematics and statistics content that they're learning in those other assessments throughout the year. So it is possible for students to fail the co-requisite and to be in an algebra-based program in Year 11 because there are other factors at play when they sit that co-requisite. They might not respond well under that kind of pressure. They might be English language learners. They could have a learning difference that makes that kind of situation not ideal for them. So placement in Year 11 classes is done from a more holistic point of view. So if we look at the sort of maths class structure, so you can see the second column there, these are Year 10 students sitting in one of those classes, and then they're carrying on into a Year 11 course, which is sort of just worked out with the maths department and also taking into consideration where that student wants to go in the future. And all of these classes have pathways forward, that there are no dead-end courses in mathematics, so the students can keep growing and can keep learning in mathematics. But the main point of this is that the numeracy co-requisite is not a determinant of what maths class they go into in Year 11. It is something separate entirely. As Juliet mentioned before, there are some things that students could do at home to sort of support building up to this co-requisite. So one of them is to take opportunities at home to talk to students within numeracy-rich activities. So I showed you briefly a question that involved a raspberry chocolate button something recipe, and they talked about increasing the recipe and doubling it and halving things, and how many cups of flour can we get from this bag of flour, and all these types of questions. Juliet mentioned that time was a factor. So asking the student, what time did you go to sleep? What time did you wake up? How long is that? How many hours of sleep did you get? So asking students these type of questions, getting them to read tables, looking at graphs that appear in the news or in publications, that those kind of conversations are going to support this numeracy growth. Students also have access to Education Perfect. Your student will know exactly what Education Perfect is, that they use it for a number of their subjects, but within that there's actually a section specifically for this numeracy co-requisite that has those 7 modules that we sort of showed you before, those 7 green strands running through the weave, and it has a module on each of those, and then it has a practice exam that they can also try. So students can keep working through that at home as well. We have practice test papers available on a Google Classroom that the students will have access to. And then just making sure that students are keeping up to date with their mathematics homework and tasks. So you can do this by keeping an eye on their learning engagement reports. So it's a learning engagement week this week. So you're about to get learning engagement grades for your students. And this is making sure that they are on track for that longer goal and that bigger pathway of where they're heading to in year 11, 12 and 13. That this numeracy co-requisite is something that we need to do, but there is a bigger goal here of the longer term future for these students. So keeping an eye on that. We do have tutorials on a Thursday afternoon, and that will support the students in the learning they're doing in their mathematics class if they wish to attend those. So those are some things that they can be doing. So the actual numeracy assessment and what students need to bring, and we will email this information out, and the students are going to get lots of prep, and they're going to get practice at logging in, and they practice at using Polly, the talking function. They need a charged laptop. So if you can imagine the theatre set up with lots and lots of students in these sort of exam desks, although we encourage them to bring the charger if their laptop has a bit of a dodgy battery, it's actually pretty hard to plug in. So make sure their laptop's charged on the day. Headphones that work with their device. So as long as it works with their device, then they will be able to use that Polly function if they want to. A calculator they're familiar with. It doesn't need to be scientific. There's not going to be any trigonometry or anything like that in this test. It's just a basic calculator. And if they bring a pen, we will give them some working paper so that they can do the working in whatever way they like. So if you can help the students remember these things on those days, then that would be great. We just don't have a whole lot of spare stuff available. So just a reminder about the dates that we've got. Wednesday, the 14th of June is the one coming up. And then the Term 4 opportunity is in the week beginning Monday, the 30th of October. And the exact date will be determined closer to the time. There's going to be a lot of detailed information coming out as it gets as we get near with reminders of what to bring. The students have links to all of these resources and reminders about their login and practice and not having VPNs on your computer and all of that kind of thing. So that is coming. Just checking my notes. That kind of brings us to the end of the stuff that we wanted to explain. We really wanted to give some understanding of what this numeracy co-requisite is. You'll hear a lot about it in the media, and it's just to give you the start point of the knowledge for that. If this is your first child coming into NCEA, there is a lot of stuff to learn, and it can be quite confusing. But as long as they're doing what they need to in their classes, then they're going to be okay. So as long as they are putting their best foot forward in their classes and engaging with the learning, then they will be all right. So what I wanted to do now is to open it up to questions. I'm going to stop presenting. For those of you that came in a little later, unfortunately, the reason you're not seeing my face is the camera on this computer has glitched in the last hour. It worked in the test and it's not working now, so I apologise that you can't see me. So I'll stop presenting. And if anybody has any questions, if you'd like to ask them or put them in the chat, then let us know.
Can you explain a little more about how the credits work? You said there were 20 for numeracy and 60 for other courses. How does that equate to how it works currently?
So at the moment, when they sit in assessment, they generally, Julie and I can speak for mathematics more so than some of the other subjects, but they're generally a standard that the students sit. So a chunk of learning that's assessed will range between 2 and 6 credits. So there's some of the bigger portfolio things are worth more, and some of the sort of smaller content stuff are worth a little less. That the credits next year for our students will be kind of chunks at around 5 credits each for each chunk. So it's sort of standardizing that a little bit. So the bigger chunks of content worth more credits. Odette, if you have any answers that you want to jump in here, then feel free. And then the students accumulate these credits and they can get them at achieved, merit and excellence. Just going to turn the recording off.